You know what I was about to say?
There's already a video on the Pthumerians on the channel.
Yeah, because I made a little note, like, reminding myself talk about the existing videos so that people know.
Yeah.
And then I keep going back to that first note.
I guess this is the equivalent of Vati remastering his old videos in Dark Souls Remastered.
Yeah. Well, no.
No? Well, yeah, he's popular.
No, because we didn't talk about the Pthumerians separately. We only mentioned them in various podcasts.
They have an entire separate thing dedicated to them, because I know I made the thumbnail.
Yeah, but it's only 10 minutes.
What if there's only 10 minutes of stuff to actually say about them?
Well, we'll see about that. If this podcast lasts longer than 10 minutes, then you were wrong.
Well, okay, because we'll have a new Prime Minister in about 80, so...
Oh, so it's like a race. Can we finish this
Can we finish this podcast before the new Prime Minister of Australia is announced?
Yeah, it's like a challenge. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
If we can't finish it in time and it's Peter Dutton, that's our fault.
I don't know what that means.
Let's go.
So, Richie, can you briefly tell me about the Pthumerians?
The Pthumerians are described as a kind of pre-human civilization. They look like humans, but they are about a head taller. They're very, very pale. Their eyes are completely black. They don't have any iris or pupil or anything. It's just like a black pit. And they are very kind of thin looking. They have, the women especially have extremely pronounced cheekbones. They are supposed to look like a vampire. They're supposed to look like, if anyone here has seen the film Bram Stoker's Dracula, by which I mean the film called Bram Stoker's Dracula, not Dracula. It's a copyright issue. The way that the vampires are depicted in that as these sort of very aristocratic, very pale people is a big influence on the Pthumerian design.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And the Pthumerians seem to have lived in dungeons at some point.
The way the Great Ones are described is that they're slumbering. So the idea is that the quote-unquote tombs under Yharnam are actually like where the Great Ones sort of lived. Like they just slumber in their tombs. It's taken from Call of Cthulhu. The idea is that the Pthumerians were like a sort of slave race to the Great Ones, and they kept the tombs. They kept the tombs running. Basically, they would expand them and they would guard them. And then over time, they were sort of like just like watching over them. And then with time, they eventually sort of rebelled. And they formed their own civilization away from the Great Ones.
The way I pictured it is that Pthumerians lived underground.
Mm-hmm.
And then the Great Ones came over and they're like, hey guys, what's up? And the Pthumerians were like, nothing much, we just live underground. And then the Great Ones are like, cool, can we chill here too? And the Pthumerians were like, yeah, sure. And then eventually Great Ones were like, hey, we wouldn't enslave you. And then the Pthumerians were like, I don't know if we're okay with that. And then the Great Ones are like, but listen, we're like outer worldly beings. You kind of don't have a choice. And then the Great Ones went to sleep, and then Pthumerians rebelled.
But that might have like been what happened, because they don't really like specify. Like they don't give you any real specifics about what happened. It just says that the Pthumerians were the guardians of the Great Ones while the Great Ones were asleep, and then they sort of like, I guess the Great Ones were asleep, like they were just resting in their tombs, and then the Pthumerians formed their own civilization, like away from the Great Ones.
So how do you think the initial encounter between Pthumerians and Great Ones went?
Well, I don't know, because, like, I guess we'll get into it later on, but Pthumerians and humans basically seem to be the same species. It's just like there's a specific human bloodline that has sort of trace Pthumerian elements in it. And if you sort of, like, give a human enough Pthumerian blood, they just turn into a Pthumerian.
Mm-hmm.
So for all we know, like, the Pthumerians just started off as humans, and then when the Great Ones showed up, they became Pthumerians, and then when they came to the surface, they were, without the influence of the Great Ones, became humans again.
Okay, I see. I want to ask you, you know how there's dungeons, chalices, and labyrinths? What's the difference between the three?
There isn't one.
Okay.
The confusing thing, right? This is, I don't fucking care that people like say don't talk about cut content because it doesn't make any sense otherwise. The idea originally was that the labyrinth that you go into was just underneath Yharnam. And you would use these chalices to unlock the labyrinth, and it would just have been like you would have just been able to walk there from Yharnam. And then for whatever reason, we don't know, they had to change it so instead of that you kind of teleported there from the Hunter's Dream. The physical like location of the labyrinth didn't really make sense after that, but like it is just underneath Yharnam.
Mm-hmm.
So it's called the labyrinth. It's also called the dungeons, and that it's referred to as like the chalice dungeons because you use a chalice to activate it.
Right.
Yeah, but they are the same thing.
Mm-hmm. And you know when you go into the dungeons, is it present, past, or future? What happens there?
Okay, I think the only way to make sense of it is to say that when you go into the dungeons, you're stepping back into a specific point in time, because otherwise huge chunks of it make absolutely no sense.
Okay.
Because, like, for example, you can meet Queen Yharnam in the present, and she has had her child stolen from her. Then you can go into the chalices and meet Queen Yharnam before her child is stolen.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And you can also do things like you can go back and meet Rom in the chalices after Rom has died. You can encounter Briatus and the Celestial Emissary in the East Chalice, even though we're told that, like, Briatus was found in the East Chalice by the choir, so, like, presumably you're going back to a point before Briatus was found. Like, there's sort of no way to make sense of it other than just saying, like, when you go into the chalices, it's sort of like being summoned into someone else's world. Like, like you can beat the cleric beast and then ring the resonant bell and then get summoned into someone else's world and fight the cleric beast again, because for them it's an earlier time. So right, I think you just have to explain it like that. Otherwise there's just no way to make sense of it. I think that may have been like, that may not just be a gameplay thing, because one of the big influences on the labyrinth part of Bloodborne is Junji Ito's Uzumaki, which ends with the characters descending into a labyrinth underneath the city that they live in. And when they reach the bottom, they start very explicitly saying, like, the deeper we go, the more time is slowing down. And at the very, very bottom of the labyrinth, they're like, time doesn't work anymore. Like, everything is just held in this eternal present.
Okay.
So I think, like, yeah. But also it feeds into a wider thing in Bloodborne, which is, like, it sort of collapses time and space into the one thing. It's something that Miyazaki does a lot in his games when he's experimenting with storytelling. So, like, if you look at the Hunter's Nightmare in the DLC, the higher you go, the further back you are going. Like, you start in the recent history of Yharnam, and then you go all the way back, and the highest point in that is the fishing hamlet, which is where everything began. The chalice dungeons are a similar thing, where, like, when they dug up the chalices, they were also digging back into Yharnam's history. Like, the deeper down to the chalice you go, the more you go back into the past of Yharnam and where everything came from.
That's so meta.
It's a bit meta, yeah.
Okay, cool. Thank you. Do you think the Pthumerians were inspired by, like, the Sumerian civilization, since they sound similar?
Well, the way it's written in Japanese, I think you can just read it as Sumerian.
Okay.
The way it's written, it's also like Ptumerian, and we were thinking, like, is it like tomb people? So it's like the Ptumerians.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it doesn't seem to have, like, an origin as a word. It's just like a weird sounding sort of odd name for something, like Yharnam.
Okay. Awesome.
Yeah.
Okay. I have a few questions about Pthumerians and their life in the dungeons.
Okay, there's not much of it.
No, there's a lot. How ancient are Pthumerians?
since the dawn of time. Like, we don't know. The problem is that, like, Bloodborne sort of ends with this, like, I guess we're going into, like, the next childhood of humanity thing. So it doesn't really pin down, like, a concrete timeline. I don't think there is a concrete timeline. It's just, like, you have to... It's just, like, the Pthumerians are the past, and... Like, there's sort of two ways Yharnam can go. There's this, like, Pthumerian past, but also there's this other place called Lauren. Lauren is somewhere that collapsed, like Yharnam is collapsing, so Yharnam reaches a kind of tipping point where, like, you're either going to end up like Pthumeru or end up like Lauren.
Right, yeah.
Right. So the exact timeline I don't think is super important unless you're, like, being really, really pedantic.
What does that mean again?
Like, if you're really, really detail obsessed, then I can understand caring about the timeline, but I don't think, like, it just has to be the past.
Okay.
Long enough for people to have forgotten that, not long enough for people to have forgotten that it exists, but still for it to exert an influence.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. And why did they live underground?
Because they were guarding the Great Ones in their tombs.
Why couldn't they have, like, above ground tombs?
Because they're buried. What would an above ground... What, Lenin?
Yeah, like a mausoleum.
Well, you know, maybe. The thing is, like, this is probably taken from Call of Cthulhu.
Okay.
Because in Call of Cthulhu, Cthulhu, who, like, became the sort of mascot of the Lovecraft mythos, he's not that important, but he is described as, like, he's a priest that oversees all these, like, sleeping things in an underground city that's on an island somewhere.
Okay.
So I think the Pthumerians are just sort of, like, it's the Cthulhu role of, like, they're just there to sort of tend to the sleeping things that haven't woken up yet. Yeah.
So why are the Great Ones sleeping?
It's a very good question. I don't think the game ever really explains it, and you don't even really meet that many Great Ones in the labyrinth. Okay, I think the idea is that what separates the Great Ones from other... Because the Great Ones aren't a species, it's just like a classification. Like, you say this thing is a Great One. What separates the Great Ones from other beings is the way that... Firstly, the way that they can't reproduce, but also the way that their consciousness projects from their body into the dreamland. So I think the idea is they're sleeping because their consciousness has moved, like, it's left their body and moved on to the dreamlands. In the same way that, like, Mikolash is, like, he has a dead body, but he's also alive in the dreamlands. So
Does it mean the Great Ones are dead in their tombs?
well, that's another Call of Cthulhu thing.
Oh.
Because they talk about, like, you're just because, like, something can be dead and also dreaming.
Huh. Okay.
Yeah, I think, like, because Miyazaki is sort of like a D&D dork from what I've seen.
Right.
So his influence may have been more so the Call of Cthulhu role-playing game than necessarily, like, the actual story. But I don't know.
Yeah, okay. Well, okay. Could the Great Ones actually be some Pthumerians who ascended and then became Great Ones?
I think that's, like, possible.
Hmm.
We don't really get a backstory for... Like, it's... The Great Ones that the Pthumerians seem to have had dealings with is, like... We think the moon presence... When you encounter Queen Yharnam, you fight her in front of this huge altar that she starts the, like, fight by praying to. And then if you do enough root chalices, which are the randomized ones, if you do enough of those, you sometimes encounter a variant of that room where the altar is... part of the top is gone, and it has a giant hunter's mark on it. And the moon presence is the thing that brands you with the hunter's mark. So she might be praying to the moon presence. We don't know, though. It's quite vague.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. We think that Kos comes from Lauren, which I don't know if that makes her a Pthumerian or not, because we don't really know who lived in Lauren.
Yeah.
It may have just been people. We think Erden. Erden is the one you can say that they most likely did, because if you accept that Yharnam, the city, is a Pthumerian city that's just been built on top of the labyrinth, then the idea that there's like an Erden chapel, and like the people there just call it Erden, but they don't seem to understand why. So I think the idea is like that is an old like Pthumerian chapel to Erden. So they had dealings with Erden.
Yeah.
And Erden, like, I don't know, Erden might be the father of Erden is definitely the father of Ariana's child. And like
Right.
the reason Ariana's able to conceive that child is because she has Pthumerian blood in her.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, and we have a whole Ariana podcast on Patreon.
Yeah. Sorry, someone just knocked on the door and I had to like look around to see who it was.
Oh no, is it the Great Ones? Are they gonna slumber in your house and enslave you?
No, I think it's the postman, but I'll he's left something on the doorstep, but I'll get it when I finish recording.
Okay.
Okay.
Cool. You know the bone ash mask? And hello?
Oh yeah, sorry, I can I just check what's at the door for a second?
Yeah,
Because there's
you
someone
can.
talking. Yeah, okay.
Yes, go ahead. Let's talk shit about Richie.
I can hear
Oh
you.
shit! You scared me! I wanted to talk shit about you to the microphone while you weren't here.
It's okay, I'm back now.
Oh my god, I bet you never left. I bet you were just waiting for me to talk shit to the microphone, and then you scared me.
No, I just went and looked out the window to see who it was. I can hear someone talking, but it's not about me, so it's fine.
Oh. Okay. So
Okay.
you know the bone ash mask, which says, a mask made of bone ash, worn by the oldest keepers, the keepers who mind the slumbering great ones,
Yep.
gained eternal life, preserved an ashen form in the ceremony of flame that cremated body and soul.
Yeah.
The long pointed head is a symbol of the old keepers and is considered evidence of their companionship, forged in a certain sin.
Yep.
Okay, Richie,
Yep.
long pointed hat,
Yeah.
executioners.
I thought you were going to say Ingvard from Dark Souls.
Who's Ingrid again?
We did a whole podcast on him. He's got a long pointed hat, and he looks after the New Londo after it's flooded.
Oh, yeah, that guy.
Yeah.
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 No.
No.
No, I was gonna say, is it like reference to the executioners?
I don't think so. I think that's just a pointed hat.
But they're the only ones who wear a pointed hat.
Well, they look different though. Like one looks like a witch's hat, and one looks like a gramophone horn.
The gramophone. And then it says that they gained eternal life, preserved in ashen form in the ceremony of flame that cremated body and soul.
Yeah.
Did you talk about that?
Well, I can, because I have encountered the cut burning warriors. I did it last night.
Whoa!
There were going to be in the chalices these, like, they looked like the Pthumerians, but they were sort of like flaming. They looked like they had parts of their body were sort of missing, and they had this like orange glow to them, like they had been burned up.
Oh, Sana showed them, or Lance. Yeah, I remember.
Yeah, so if anyone's like, oh, those were cut from the game, not anymore, because the chalice with them in it is now on the server, so you can go and visit them.
Oh, snap!
And I was doing it last night, and I fought them.
How are they?
They're all right. They're very like soulsy enemies. Like they have bows and arrows that they shoot at you from a distance. They don't use guns. And when you beat them, instead of their body flopping on the ground, they like dissolve. I think the idea is like because they're made of like ash and stuff, they would dissolve into a cloud and float away or something.
Well, it's interesting you mention it because I was about to tell you that this whole description sounds very soulsy.
Yeah, they're a very soulsy sort of thing, and I think the keepers of the old lords were a maybe connected to that at some point. The idea of like people being sort of burned alive to
Mhm.
look after the Pthumerians as like these ash things.
So basically, when one of the Great Ones linked the first flame,
Yep.
it burned up those guys.
Solaire is a Great One theory confirmed real.
Yeah. Kind of like, what are those, some Knights of Gwyn or something walk around aimlessly because they also burned up?
Yeah, they were burned in when the first flame was... Yeah. One thing that they talk about in Bloodborne is like that flame sort of burns away the beast plague. Like if you have enough, like beasts have this innate fear of flame, and like the vermin that crawl around inside you when you have the plague, they react very badly to flame. Like there are those silver beasts where if you kill them, the vermin burst out, but if you kill them with a flame weapon, the vermin die before they can burst out. So it could be that like the fire was a purification thing to stop those people turning.
Like stop them turning by burning them alive?
Yeah, like it's like a purification thing. If you burned everything away, then like you would remove all traces of the beast scourge from them to make sure they didn't transform.
Well, you know how you say that beasts were scared of fire or something?
They have it like it's like an innate fear.
I think that's everyone though. Like if you set me on fire to die, I'm pretty sure
it's true, yeah.
Yeah.
It's just sensible.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like in RPGs when it's like, oh, this thing's weak to being electrocuted. Like, yeah, but also, like most things probably. Like, if you hit most stuff with a bolt of lightning, it's probably not going to do very well.
And they say here, forged in a certain sin. Forged in a certain me.
Go on.
That's it.
Yeah, I have no idea what the sin is supposed to be.
I know what it is.
Is it a reference to you?
No, it's Aldia.
Well, he is also on fire, so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sin, fire, Aldia, scholar of the first sin.
Yeah.
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 So basically, this person wearing the bone ash mask accidentally walked into Bloodborne instead of Dark Souls 3.
Possible. They've got a katana.
There you go. Mystery solved. Oh, and here it says, considered evidence of their companionship. So, like, they were friends?
With the Great Ones.
So these guys weren't enslaved? They were just, like, BFFs?
They're, like, looking after the Great Ones. So, like, they're the companions.
So it's not BFFs, it's still a slave?
Well, we can't really ask them. Presumably they weren't that happy if they ended up rebelling.
But did these guys end up rebelling?
Well, this is another point of contention that we never really get a straight answer on. You find Pthumerian corpses and things lying around the labyrinth, and they have this armor on that's very distinctive. And then when you go to Canehurst, you can see there that there's portraits of people wearing that exact armor set. So it looks like there was some kind of and those armored Pthumerians never show up in the labyrinth. They're always dead. So it looks like there was some kind of civil war within Pthumeru, and then whoever it was that wore those armor sets was like expelled, and then their ancestors were the ancestors of Canehurst. And that's why Canehurst has their armor sets. Yeah.
Yeah. But my question, and you should have understood it because I pointed to the description when I asked it.
I'm sorry.
To show you that I specifically mean these guys, like the witches or whatever, bone ash mask wearing witches.
Yeah.
Like, do you think they rebelled? Like, because where are they gonna go? They're like burnt. They're like ash. They probably can't even leave the labyrinth. Do you ever find them above ground?
Well, this is the thing, because like most of the Pthumerians in the labyrinth have an above ground equivalent.
Do they?
I think their above ground equivalent is the Shadows of Yharnam.
No.
They have similar weapons and they recycle the same animations.
But aren't the shadows of Yharnam like invisible?
No, you can see them pretty well. Is your copy glitched?
Mm.
It's going to turn out that when you fought them, they were invisible, and I have to take back.
No!
I have to take back acting like you were like doing badly. It's like, oh yeah, well if they were invisible, it's probably quite difficult.
No, I mean like their face. You don't see their face, but the Bone Ash mask face looks like a skeleton.
The thing about the Shadows of Yharnam is, right, they do have a face. Like, if you go up to them and you hold the torch up, they have facial features. Their texture is just flat black. So I don't know if
they look like the Bone Mash mask?
The Bone Mash ass.
I told you I can't speak anymore. I don't know. It's been a couple of weeks.
It's like a drunk person trying to say Monster Mash.
So, do the Shadows of Yharnam under their hoodies look like the Bone Ash people?
But we don't know what the Bone Ash people look like under their masks because it's a mask.
No, it's a skeleton face.
You can wear it. It's a mask.
Okay, I didn't know that.
It's got 6 eyes.
What?
There's like the eyes, and then above that there's another 2 sets of eyes.
What?
Yeah.
Okay, what are they called?
Keepers of the Old Lords.
Keepers of the Old Lords.
Hang on, I'm amazed for a second. You didn't realize you could get that armor set, but you're getting all this information from the armor set description. Did that not tip you off to the fact that you could get it in the game?
I don't know, okay? I see. I didn't realize the channelers thing that was going on.
Yeah, if you beat the Keeper of the Old Lords, you can buy that armor set from the Insight Bath.
But are you sure that's not their face?
I'm pretty sure it's not because you can wear it.
So what? Cannibal wore that other guy's face in that movie.
Yeah, that's true.
So I think it's up to interpretation.
It is up to interpretation, yes.
Okay, so I wrote notes and questions and intelligent comments. I did not think this was going to go this way. I thought this was going to be like an intelligent podcast. It started out good. I was very proud of us. And then okay. So okay, I got to wake up my boyfriend. He's taking a nap. Oh my god, my boyfriend is a slumbering great one. And I was guarding his sleep. Oh my god, I'm a Pthumerian.
Are you tall enough?
Oh god, okay, I'm like a tiny Pthumerian.
You're about half the size of a Pthumerian.
Pretty much, yeah.
You're like those little things in Murgo's loft.
Yeah, there we go, that's me.
You're just chasing me around with like a cat of 9 tails making me record podcasts.
Yes. Oh my god. Okay, I'm gonna wake up my boyfriend. I will be right back.
Okay.
Oh, fuck. Hello? 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 Hello?
I'm back.
Oh god. Are you okay?
Getting my headphones on.
Oh my god. Are you okay? I was so worried.
No, I just wanted to check on what was going on outside.
And?
Oh, it's just that the neighbor's kid is having a party in a couple of days, and he was just coming by to say there might be a lot of noise. So if it got too loud, to just tell him, and he would tell them to knock it off.
Did he invite you, though?
No.
That's so rude.
Well, I've never spoken to him.
Are you eating?
No, I was scratching the side of my nose.
Okay, because it sounded like you were eating.
Okay, I'm not.
Better not be. If I'm not snacking, nobody's snacking.
That's true. I understand.
Okay, thank you. Okay. The rebellion.
The rebellion.
Could you talk about the whole rebellion thing in a little more detail?
Well, there isn't much detail that you're given.
Mm-hmm.
Basically, what happens is there are these Pthumerian we assume they're Pthumerian because they're in the labyrinth. Armored corpses lying everywhere.
Did you just say armored corpses?
Like Armored Core.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't think that's a deliberate reference.
Okay.
There are armored bodies lying everywhere. And there's sort of little set pieces where you see like Pthumerians behind cannons that are pointing at piles of corpses and stuff. So the impression you get is there was some kind of like Pthumerian versus Pthumerian fight in the labyrinth. And then when you go to Canehurst, there are portraits in Canehurst that depict a man who is wearing that same armor set. And they're also full of stuff from the Chalice dungeons. So it looks like there was some sort of Pthumerian civil war, and one of the Pthumerian factions, who were the kind that wore that armor, were forced to the surface, and they became Canehurst and then Yharnam.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's odd because it does, like, you could just say, well, there's just bodies down here because Pthumerians, but it does look like there is, like, they were fighting each other, and you never see the armored ones at any point in the labyrinth. You only ever see their bodies. So it does look like there was a war between them, and the faction that wore the armor ended up leaving.
Mm-hmm.
Mm.
And so could you talk about the two factions briefly?
That's all we know. That's literally it. We just, like, there was some sort of conflict, and one of them ended up becoming Canehurst. And I guess the other one becomes Yharnam.
Wait, where do executioners fit in there?
Well, we've had this discussion before.
Yeah, I know,
Yeah,
but that's why I said briefly, and then after you talk about it, I can be like, oh yeah, executioners, Snack Covenant, episode 8.
Is it 8?
I'm pretty sure, I don't know.
We missed a trick by not doing something special for episode 8, because we're eating things.
What?
Episode 8.
Yeah?
Snacks 8.
Why?
Because you ate them.
Oh! You know what? I'm gonna go back and replace the executioner episode with, like, us eating things.
Nothing of value will be lost, so.
Oh, damn, Richie. That's actually a good one, I think. Oh, no, it wasn't. Oh, right. It's the one that was... I remember. It was like 4 hours long.
Yeah, that's all of them.
No, this one was special because I cut it down to 3 hours. Anyway, so somebody wanted, like, a sort of, I guess, uncut version of something. So I put the 3-hour version on YouTube. I mean, on Patreon. And then I think the 2-hour version made it to YouTube.
Okay.
Where was I going with this?
You asked me about executioners.
Yeah, okay, cool. So, yeah, where do the executioners fit into the whole rebellion?
Well, all right. There are executioners in the labyrinth. You can run into them sometimes. And it's very confusing because prior to the DLC, you could kind of be like, okay, Alfred wants to kill Annalise, so he's probably, like, the executioners maybe just hated Annalise, and they were against her. But at the same time, the DLC added a friendly summon called Queen Killer, who is an executioner who you can summon to kill Queen Yharnam. So it looks like they oppose both of them. Mm-hmm. So it's kind of a mess. And, like, I think I made it sort of like... I made it pretty clear in I think, the Executioners podcast that, like, the whole Executioner thing is just baffling to me, and I don't know why they did it. because
Mm-hmm.
like that whole strand of the plot, if you just replace executioners with church hunters, makes several orders of magnitude more sense. If you just say the
Yeah.
church hunters went to Canehurst and that's why Annalise hates the church, and that's why there's a giant altar of an executioner in Cathedral Ward. Versus the version we have now where, like, they went there and their leader for some reason was a Pthumerian and they're from a faraway land. And even though they're, like, the church employed them, I guess, but also there's a giant executioner statue in Cathedral Ward. And having to come up with all of these, like, retcons about, like, oh, well, the reason they dress like the church is that the church patterned their uniform after them, even though the church clearly patterned their uniform after Willem, who, it's just like...
Yeah.
If I could change one thing about Bloodborne, it would be that. Because it's just such a weird, like, decision. I don't quite understand why they did it.
And Aegon actually has an episode. I think it's with you and Redgrave on...
Canehurst?
Was it Canehurst? I remember
I did the Canehurst one with him, yeah.
with Redgrave?
No, with Aegon.
Yeah, but there's one with you, Aegon, and Redgrave, isn't it?
That's the final one.
Oh, maybe it was just Aegon and Redgrave?
It might have been, yeah. I think they did Pthumeru Hill together. I can't
Okay.
remember, yeah.
Well, anyway, go to Aegon's channel, like search for Pthumeru, Vilebloods, Executioners, whatever. They're really good episodes, and listen to them. They're really, really good. Okay, so basically, Pthumerians were watching over slumbering Great Ones,
Yep.
and then Pthumerians rebelled.
Yep. I just realized this is an hour long, and we've just gone to... So the Pthumerians were watching over... which was, like, the first thing we talked about. We've just come back to it.
Okay, and then Pthumerians rebelled, but there were also conflicts within the Pthumerians.
The way it... Yeah.
And so some of them went above ground and became Vilebloods, and some of them
Well...
became Yarnamites?
Okay, so it says that, like, the first break from the Great Ones is when they name themselves a queen.
Right. Yeah.
So both the ones in the Labyrinth and the ones in Canehurst have a queen.
Yeah.
And it talks about the queen being, like, Yharnam's not the first queen. There's, like, a whole dynasty of queens, and there's, like,
Yeah.
you can...
I have the quote here. I have the quote.
Okay,
I came prepared.
go on.
Okay, so the Great Pthumeru Hill Chalice says that this reveals that while early Pthumerians were mere humble guardians of the slumbering Great Ones, their descendants felt entitled to name themselves a leader. And then Pthumeru Hill Root Chalice says the Pthumerian monarch was traditionally a woman who assumed a name with classical roots.
Yes.
Go on.
Well, what about that needs further clarification?
I don't know. Oh, well, when they say a name with classical roots, what do they mean?
Well, what they mean is, like, the reveal is supposed to be that you run into Queen Yharnam, right? And you're not supposed to know at this point that her name is going to be Yharnam. So you get to the bottom of Pthumeru Hill. For some reason, the boss is called Yharnam, the Pthumerian queen. And you're like, what? Why is she called Yharnam? So you then beat her, and you get the root chalice, which then says she assumed a name with classical roots, as in the word Yharnam is a Pthumerian word, which is supposed to be the final sort of, like, puzzle piece slots into place, that Yharnam, the city, is a Pthumerian city. They've just forgotten their own past.
And so Yarnamites are Pthumerians.
Yes.
And so are they the Pthumerians that were against the Vilebloods?
Okay. One of the things about the history of Yharnam that is, like, it is in there, and it was probably a bit more played up in earlier drafts but got lost, is that The history of Yharnam is not, Yharnam is a normal city, and then one day Lawrence shows up and says, hey, try this blood, and then they become obsessed with blood. What happens is Yharnam as a city was always obsessed with blood. It was basically a city of, like, 1/8 vampire people. Who, because they were descended from the Pthumerians, they'd forgotten that, but they still had that, like, Pthumerian lust for blood in them.
Okay.
Right. Because of that, that's why the Healing Church were able to get the power that they have. Because Lawrence was able to say, oh, you're the guys who were really into blood. I can hook you up with even better blood. Like this even more potent sort of blood. So, like, they were always like that. He just preyed on that. It wasn't a case of, like, this was a normal sort of, like, Victorian Gothic city, and then within a couple of generations, they turned into that. Like, they were kind of always like that. What all Lawrence did was, like, he was able to introduce that because they were already kind of hooked on blood. And the decline of it was the decline from them being hooked on blood to being hooked on blood and also, like, becoming beasts.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, if they're descendants of Pthumerians, because Pthumerians didn't turn into beasts, so why did Yharnamites turn into beasts?
Because, like, what happens is that, like, Yharnam, the city, is literally built over the Pthumerian labyrinth. Like, they just kept building upward. And then over the generations, that becomes Yharnam. That's why Yharnam's got, like, it has gargoyles that look like messengers. And it's got, like, a chapel called Erden Chapel that's the chapel of a great one.
Mm-hmm.
And, like, it's got a giant clock tower that's got Carol runes on it. And you have, like, the statues of, like, Amygdala and these statues of these, like, weird sort of, like, tentacle things everywhere. Because, like, it's just the upper part of the labyrinth. But they have forgotten the labyrinth exists. Over time, it's just become lost to history.
Yeah, I just feel like they should have been immune to the whole beast thing, because their ancestors were.
No, but the thing is, their ancestors were quote-unquote immune because they were able to, like, transcend and become something else. Whereas, like, over time...
Right. Okay.
Yeah, that knowledge has... The knowledge and enlightenment has been lost, and they've become just, like, regular people. That's also, like...
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, go on.
No, go on. No, you go.
Yeah, and it's like Ariana is a good example of that. Like, Ariana is... She looks like a normal human, but she has within her this, like, dormant Pthumerian blood that's stronger than everyone else's, and that's why she's able to conceive a child under the red moon.
Mm-hmm.
So, like, she's like... There's enough Pthumerian in her for that to happen, but she doesn't look Pthumerian. She doesn't know that she is.
Mm-hmm.
And it looks like the bloodline is stronger at Canehurst. That's this, by the way, this is the whole, like, when Alfred's like, oh, a scholar from Bergenworth brought the blood to Canehurst, and then Canehurst became the Vile Bloods. As though, like, people sort of take that to mean Canehurst was always, like, it was just like a castle, and then they developed the, like, the Pthumerian stuff as a result of blood being brought there. When it's more like, no, they were always a Pthumerian family. They always had all these, like, Pthumerian relics and paintings of Pthumerians all over the castle. The thing is that all that blood did when it was brought there was sort of, like, activate them again. It was like bringing all the Pthumerian traits kind of came back to the surface because the blood was going back into their bodies again.
So, you know how Ariana gets pregnant and Adela doesn't?
Yeah.
And that's because Ariana is related to the Vile bloodline somehow?
Yeah, because Ariana's blood is stronger.
Her blood is stronger, okay. But if Adela's from Yharnam, and if her blood was a little stronger, she could get pregnant too then, from Odin Chapel.
Yeah, and there's all this discussion of, like, Adela doesn't like Ariana because her blood is, like, dirty to Adela.
Yeah.
So, like, Adela is, I guess because she's a blood saint, her blood has been, like, purified over and over again, so it's, like, thinning out the Pthumerian aspect of it. It's weird because, like, when we were looking at the data mining, there's, like, a Pthumerian version of Adela that exists in there that we don't quite understand, and, like, maybe she like one of the plans was that she would become Pthumerian the more blood she took or something. There's a Pthumerian Ariana in there as well, where it's like Ariana's model, but she looks more like she's very, very pale and her eyes go black and she gets very, very pale hair.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay. Oh, and you know how they're Pthumeru, eye hill, chalice things?
Yeah.
What's an eye hill?
It's just the name of the city.
What does it mean?
Doesn't mean anything. It's like a made-up Pthumerian language.
So it's like Yarnum, eye hill.
Yeah, Yarnum, eye hill, Pthumeru. What else is there? I think that's it.
So it's possible that at some point there was a Queen Eye Hill.
Yeah, because it says like the Pthumerian monarch is like traditionally a woman who assumes a name with classical roots. So like it's a tradition and it had been going on for a long time and like, yeah, I don't know, like Annalise. Annalise doesn't sound like a Pthumerian name, but
No.
Well,
I don't know.
I'm sure there's a diagram somewhere.
So, they were choosing a monarch after they rebelled, but they were still underground and lived in Eye Hill?
Yeah, Eye Hill is meant to be the like capital of the Pthumerians.
Okay. And the Great Ones didn't live in Eye Hill.
I guess the problem is that the chalices are just like the same 4 rooms over and over again. So you just have to like Yeah, I think so. I think Eye Hill is just like their city that they built after the because the way it's described is like there's the Pthumerians naming themselves a queen and having their own civilization with like the elders and the queen and the descendants and everything. But at the same time, then there's like what it is called the Labyrinth Watchers. And it talks about them like almost like they're zombies. And they just like their only purpose is to just continue to expand the labyrinth.
Mm-hmm.
So they just walk around with these pickaxes, just like digging extra like holes in walls and then filling them in and building more tombs. And like the Hinter tombs are described as just like, there's no great ones there. They just keep tunneling because they don't know what else to do.
Okay. We don't have any Vile Blood videos, do we?
Shouldn't you know? I mean, I don't, but
Oh, you have Vile Blood videos on your channel.
do I? Oh yeah. Don't.
Yeah, it's really good though. It's
It's
good.
really bad.
No, it's really amazing.
No, it's wrong.
It doesn't matter. It's still amazing.
Because that Canehurst thing is like from years ago, and in the interim, like I've got a better idea.
It's a good look. It's a good look at like.
Fine.
No, it's still a good video. It's still good. It's a good educational video. Like whatever on what we thought of Vile Bloods back in the day.
The evolving Pthumerian discourse.
There we go. You mentioned something that I didn't realize. I guess I kind of realized it, but didn't think about it. Pthumerians have trick weapons.
They do, yes.
Like, for example, the scythe an elder uses and the moonlight sword.
Yeah, the Pthumerian elder's weapon it's a staff, and on the end of it there is this flame, and he's able to have the flame shift into different forms like a trick weapon. So it can become a mace and a scythe and a bow. The moonlight sword is also a Pthumerian weapon. It's something that Ludwig found when he was exploring the dungeons. And then you see like the shadows of Yharnam, if we accept them as Pthumerians, then like they've got something that looks like a Tonitrus. They've got a katana that looks like the Chikage. The Keeper of the Old Lords also has the Chikage kind of katana thing, and then there's other Pthumerians that they have guns that look like a sort of weirder version of the guns that the Yharnamites use. So yeah, it's like what I was talking about, sort of time and space being collapsed into one thing for narrative purposes. That like this is the history of Yharnam, so we're going back to pre-Yharnamite civilization, but it's the same things are happening. It's like they've got transforming weapons, they've got guns, they've got werewolves, they kind of dress the same. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And Ligarius also have what looks like a Pthumerian weapon?
Yeah, Ligarius is just, like, again, going back to the whole fucking Pthumerian executioner catastrophe that is, like, that part of the story. Like, Ligarius just is a Pthumerian. Like, they don't say it, but he very clearly is.
Yeah. He's like very pale and 10 feet tall.
Yeah, but on top of that, like, he has weapons that look Pthumerian. He has almost the same moveset as the Pthumerian Elder.
Yeah.
He's got, like, all these sort of, like, gems and sort of, like, things hanging off him that look very Pthumerian. So, like, you just sort of have to accept that, like, okay, I guess that he's part of a faction of Pthumerians who wanted to get rid of Annalise.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So, oh yeah, what I wanted to ask you before is that, so there are factions of Pthumerians that went above ground or whatever. So there is Vile Bloods, Yarnamites, and Executioners. So,
well,
are they all like against each other? Are Yarnamites and Executioners against Vile Bloods, or like?
Well, it looks like the Pthumerians who were fighting each other in the labyrinth, as they got to the surface, became Yharnam and Cainhurst.
What makes you say that? Like, until you talked about it a few, like, I guess, months ago, I didn't even realize the Yarnamites could have been Pthumerians.
Well, this, like, I think we talked about this, like, in another context, but, like, one of the reasons that I get detail obsessed about the game is that, like, in order to understand, like, basic story beats, you have to make those connections. It's not just, like, here's a story, and then also off in the side, if you, like, really pay attention to this one thing, that's, like, you know, a story about a knight who died and it was sad. Like, the way that Yharnam is Pthumeru and Cainhurst is also Pthumeru, and, like, that's the past, and then what the Healing Church do through digging stuff up is they literally bring the past back into the present, is a really important part of that story. But if you don't know that the game is signaling that that is what is going on, you will miss it, and it just looks like there's just a labyrinth there.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, it looks like, yeah, the Yharnam is 100% Pthumerian. It is built over the Pthumerian labyrinth is just the basement. They just don't know it's there because it's all sealed off. And the reason it's sealed off is because of the chalices, and that's why, like, this is, like, it's more overt in earlier drafts of the story that the Healing Church are trying to get their hands on the chalices because they want those to be able to get deeper into the labyrinth, because they keep running into these seals that they need the chalices to break. That's still in there, it's just played down. This is what I mean about, like, we just cut content. Like, it's kind of cut, it's still in there, it's like 10% in there, and it's just like an issue of emphasis that, like, this thing is still in there, and, like, you have to understand it was more important, and then they sort of, like, stripped it down a bit, so that part, it's still in there, it's just more vague than it used to be, but it's definitely there. So, like, Yharnam is on top of the labyrinth, and then Cainhurst is from the labyrinth, because there's just all this Pthumerian stuff lying around there. And there's portraits of people who look like Pthumerians, and you can they're showing, like, the way that the Pthumerians became people over time. So you can go to Cainhurst and you can see there's a painting of someone, and she looks like a bell maiden, but she doesn't look like a bell maiden. She looks like a person cosplaying a bell maiden. She doesn't look like the bell maidens you run into. They have these, like, zombie faces. Their, like, cheeks are all collapsed. They look like monsters. But here's just, like, a normal looking woman dressed as a bell maiden. So the idea is, like, they start off looking like monsters, and then as the Pthumerian bloodline is sort of thinned out over time, they just start looking like people until you get to, like, just the yarn. And, like the Witch of Hemwick. She's connected to Cainhurst. She's right in front of it. She looks like a sort of more human version of there's these other hunchbacked witches in the labyrinth that look like they're much more Pthumerian looking. They have, like, the big black pit eyes, and they have these, like, sort of distorted jaws and very, very long arms and legs, but you don't usually see because they're, like, hunched over into a little ball when they move around. But they're also very, very tall when they stand up. And the Witch of Hemwick is just like, she's, however many, possibly hundreds of generations later. You get, like, it's the same kind of person, but without the Pthumerian blood in them, so they just appear to be like a sort of hunchbacked woman. You wouldn't think she wasn't human.
Okay.
And even, like, the way that there are those massive Yharnamite hunters that have the big bricks that they bash you with. That's the Yharnam equivalent of, like, okay, they're the merciless watchers in the labyrinth. Those, like, massive fat guys that, like, over time, like, not like it's literally the same people, but like a Yharnam's rediscovering its past, so it's also producing these sort of enormous sort of bloated people that are incredibly strong, that beyond sort of what you would expect of a normal human.
Are they Gale?
Yes.
Okay. Did we ever beat Gale?
I did. I don't know if you did.
Okay, because I didn't on my own. I was wondering if we ever beat him together.
Well, that would involve you actually finishing a game that you start playing.
But I'm at the Ringed City at Gale. So for some reason I thought maybe somebody helped me beat him, but no, I guess he's still there. I guess he's still talking shit, man. She's like, it's been 2 years. She's scared. He's tough, though.
Yes.
God.
Yeah, I fought him again recently with Goldtooth on Twitch.
Mm-hmm.
And he was tough, but then, like, after she beat him, she went back and fought him a couple more times, and then she was like, no, I think this is a good boss. It just took me a while to learn how his patterns worked. So, yeah, we may have to be, like, more positive about Gale in the future, because I only ever fought him, like, a couple of times.
Oh. And I was listening to the Duckfeed podcast you did about the Ringed City.
Yeah, where I was brought on to be positive.
Yeah.
That went well.
You weren't very positive, Richie.
Well, I was more positive than them, and it's all relative.
Okay. Okay. So, trick weapons. Is it possible that, like, Bergenworth or Hunters or whoever copied their trick weapons, like got their trick weapon idea from the Pthumerian weapons?
Well, the way it's explained is, like, trick weapons was something that Gurman invented. I think it specifies that. I don't know.
So, do you think he followed the Tara Banks adage, steal from the best and make it your own?
Possibly.
Okay.
I think I don't think, like, it's supposed to be, like, a logical, oh, he got the idea. I think it's just meant to be like, hey, isn't what we're going through now the same thing that happened in the past? Like, not necessarily a logical, like, he got the idea from here.
I think it would make sense, though.
But do you think he went into the labyrinth?
Well, I don't know. Either he went into the labyrinth or somebody went, and then when they came back, they were talking about it, and he, like, overheard them, or he was part of it or something, and then he got the idea.
He's just sitting there with a notebook. It's like transforming sort of course.
Yes. Oh, I just thought of something.
Yeah.
You know how Ligarius has a scythe?
Yep.
And then the elder, one of his weapons is a scythe?
It is.
And then Gurman has a scythe.
Yep.
So maybe he did copy it.
I guess. You could say that.
I'm just saying that's a lot of coincidences.
Yeah, but there's also just, like, sometimes narratives don't have strictly logical, like, connections. It's just like an aesthetic connection.
Okay. Oh, what is the Pthumerian relationship with runes?
Well, they really like the Hunter's Rune. It's all over the labyrinth.
Yeah.
The Guidance Rune seems to have come from a Pthumerian weapon.
Mm-hmm.
because Ludwig gets it in his head when he picks up the Moonlight Sword. You do find the Pthumerian... You find runes in the Chalice dungeon, so they must have known about them. And, like, Erden... Like, they're big on Erden, apparently, because there's, like, there's the Erden Chapel in Yharnam, where you can find, like, a giant Erden rune and everything, so...
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, like, the way that the Erden runes, the way that the Carol runes work is almost like they exist independently of kind of the interpreter. They're just like these platonic forms that get inside people's heads and they just learn to transcribe. And like, if they're just the voices of the Great Ones, then like, if they were underground with the Great Ones, they would have interpreted the runes at some point.
Mm-hmm. And you have videos touching on runes on your channel.
Do I?
Yeah.
Okay, I guess I do.
Well, you have the big one.
The Erden one.
Oh, I was thinking the clock tower one.
Oh, yeah, the clock tower. Well, that's another thing where, like, that clock tower is probably, like, I don't think the Healing Church built that clock. I think it was probably always there.
Okay.
They just moved into it. Like, it's an old Pthumerian, like, temple, and that's why the clock is covered in all of these, like, Carol runes. Yeah.
Okay. Oh, I also have a video about Carol runes on this channel.
The horsefish rune?
No, that's another one. No, one that I did by myself before podcasts took over, so it was a good video. And we had another one where we talked about runes together.
Yeah.
And yeah, there's also the best guidance rune video ever, which is on my channel as well.
Yep.
It was pretty good, though. I said it was pretty good, though, Richard.
It was pretty good. I can safely say that it's pretty good. I don't know if I'd say it's all right, but it's pretty good. Let's not go crazy here. It's adequate.
And that video is the precursor to the horsefish phenomenon.
Yeah. I like how we've been doing these for less than a year, and you can just chart like the gradual deterioration of this channel. Of like both of our outputs, where like we were both attempting to do this properly, and then after we got together, there was like within a couple of months we'd sort of like played up each other's worst traits, and it's now terrible.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's true. If you go back to what was it?
The Queen of Lothric.
The Queen of Lothric. There it is. Yeah, I think.
It starts there because you call her the Queen of Lothric.
Yes. No, but it was the first video we recorded, and we recorded it right after I did, I think, a really good Queen of Lothric video, which was like well done, well thought out. I consulted with you on some of the notes. It was like a cool thing. It was serious, and then we did the Queen of Lothric.
Yeah.
And
that was the beginning of the end.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it was like normal. It was like we were very like I was very professional, I guess. And then we did the definitions, and then we did Manses. I think Manses is when like traits of things potentially going downhill in the future appeared.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then we did a couple of normal ones with the Dark Souls characters.
Yeah. I think the Edgar one was the point at which we just gave up.
I think it was before the Edgar one. The Edgar one was the point at which we posted it, because until then, I think I was still
been editing it out. Yeah.
Yeah, that was like. This is the point at which I expected people to be like, "We're reporting your channel to the police." This is unacceptable. But no.
Yeah.
Yeah. So. Are you memorizing all these videos I'm mentioning? Because I'd like to put them in the description.
No. Not even. I've forgotten what we're even talking about.
Okay. So then Let's move on to. Oh, you're gonna love this. I had an idea.
Uh-oh.
Okay, you know how Mef's wiki, which is Bloodborne, wiki.com.
And for people who don't speak Russian, that is bloodborne-wiki.com.
Yeah. She has a section,
Yep.
which is this. And if you scroll down, you can see Chalice dungeon bosses.
Yep.
So I thought we could go through them one by one and quickly just like talk about them.
What now?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, I guess before that I'll ask you, it's about the dungeons again. So you know there's we talked about Hill, but there's also Lauren and Isiza.
Yep.
So like are Lauren and Isiza part of Pthumeru, or are they something separate?
No, they're not. This is the thing, because like this is why I was saying, like early on they were just the basement of Yharnam, basically. Like Lauren is implied to be Lauren is a completely different place.
Okay.
Lauren is like a city that came in between Pthumeru and Yharnam.
Okay.
It's talked about as though it's the past, but it's the more recent past. They say that like, oh, we've been to Lauren and like it's a land that was lost. Confusingly, they say it's lost to the sand. And when you go there, it's like there's sand everywhere. And the implication is like, this probably isn't under Yharnam. It's probably like far away, which is odd. And yeah, they like that if you go to Lauren, there's like traces of there being like medical procedures performed there that are similar to what the Healing Church are doing. And when you go there, there's the little tiny beast patients from Old Yharnam are a really common enemy there, and they're not in the Pthumeru chalices. And you also find like the blood-starved beast from Old Yharnam is one of the bosses there.
Well, we don't have to go into details because you actually have a whole video on your channel that talks about this stuff.
I can't remember. But like the idea is that Lauren came in between Pthumeru and Yharnam. And the way they talk about it is like there's all this evidence that in Lauren there was also a healing church, and they were also like trying to heal people there. It was turning them into beasts. And from looking at the ruins of Lauren, there is this fear that like Yharnam might go in this direction. Mm-hmm. There's enemies in Lauren that are called Lauren clerics. So the idea is that that's Lauren's version of the healing church. There's these beast people and they wear these white robes similar to actually what the choir wear.
And we actually have an episode on them on Patreon, which is another rare episode that doesn't suck. Because again, I felt bad that people were signing up for Patreon and all the content was so bad. And, okay, thank you. And what's is
it's described as like, it's really weird because they talk about actually one more thing about Lauren.
Okay.
Lauren becomes the Nightmare Frontier.
Mm-hmm. And you talk about this in your video on your channel.
Yeah. Lauren is the Nightmare Frontier is to Lauren what the Hunter's Nightmare is to Yharnam. The people of Lauren became the Lauren Silver Beasts and the big rock-throwing giants. And the giant brain that Mensis find there is probably like their equivalent of Rom or something, like a great one that failed to properly work. Is.
What?
Is. We're finally going to talk about it. Is. Or is. What do you call it?
Is.
I call it is.
But there's a Z in the end.
Is is.
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 Yeah. I wanted to ask you, I just got an idea.
Uh-oh. This is the most ominous thing you ever say, is I just had an idea.
You know how... the city of Yarnum to Queen Yarnum, what Lauren is to Lawrence. Because Lauren sounds similar. Can't stop. I'm sorry. Did you hear that?
Yes.
What do you think?
Well, it's not the stupidest thing I've heard.
Okay. This reminds me of the Son of DSK podcast.
Yeah, except it's a different audience. So they're it's like the opposite, and they really like the complete shambolic nature of it.
So they're not gonna kill me.
Well,
Some might.
the problem is like a bunch of Lance's viewers have come over.
Oh, we're gonna have to apologize to them in the beginning of this.
Did he do that like of his own accord, or did you tell him to mention us?
No, he did it.
Oh, okay. I thought you had been pestering him and being like, you have to mention us.
No, we chill. I don't pester him. I just troll him sometimes. He likes yogurt a lot. He does. When I'm like, what you eating? He's like, yogurt. All the time. Okay.
What were we talking about?
I don't know. Okay. Oh, and there's also something called, oh, you mentioned it, the Hintertomb.
Yeah.
And that's just hallways?
That's just like Hintertomb, as in like hinterlands. Like it's just a far away piece of the tomb.
What's a hinterland?
Just means like a land that is far away. Like, you know,
is that a real word?
Yeah.
Oh.
It's like saying like, oh, you know, I met someone from the hinterlands. It just means like a remote, like far away place.
Okay, and is it connected to Pthumeru?
Yeah, it's just like they just kept digging out tombs. So like the parts of the tombs that are far away from Yharnam are just called the Hintertombs.
Okay. Okay, awesome. Oh, and you know, okay, how there's like the Pthumeru chalice, Pthumeru root chalice, central Pthumeru, lower Pthumeru, or whatever. Like, what do these levels represent, lore-wise? What do these levels represent, lore-wise? I can't speak. Do you see? Do you see, Richie?
Yeah, I do.
Do you know? I keep wanting to pronounce W's as V's, like a Russian.
Yeah,
I don't know what's up.
It's like Benedict Cumberbatch trying to say penguin.
What? Why? What?
Benedict Cumberbatch narrated a documentary about penguins, but he can't say the word penguin.
What? Why not?
I don't know.
How does he say it?
Penguin. So there's a whole documentary about penguins narrated by Benedict Cumberbatch, where he's just constantly going like, "These provide shelter for penguins."
Okay, so I don't have to feel bad about this.
No, you too could be in Sherlock.
Okay, so what do these levels represent lore-wise?
You're just going deeper, like down, like that's what it is.
Okay.
It's like I was saying about collapsing time and space. Like you're just going deeper and deeper into the past, the deeper down you go.
Okay. Um, and there's also the sinister, defiled, cursed.
Mm.
I guess we're gonna have a whole episode on the Chalice dungeons at some point. So just briefly, what do these represent lore-wise?
They don't represent anything. They're just like, you just perform a slightly different ritual so that when that part of it opens, like, it's like slightly different things are happening there.
Mm-hmm. They do provide some background lore a little bit, like...
Yeah, there's stuff written on the chalices that tell you a little bit more. And like it
Yeah.
sort of, it kind of explains that like the reason hunters use bells and like everyone's obsessed with bells is that they found these like sinister bells in the labyrinth and started experimenting with them. Yeah.
Okay.
It also, it makes the connection to the Witch of Hemwick and Pthumeru a bit stronger, because if you perform the is it the fetid or rotted ritual, then like the Witch of Hemwick is just a regular enemy in the dungeons. She's just walking around. Like it specifically makes her a thing. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and also like that's one thing you can do is basically like add the Witch of Hemwick to every layer. There was a this is not removed, but it's kind of removed. There was going to be an equivalent of that for Rom. There was going to be like a Rom thing you could do on the chalices where it would replace like half the enemies with spiders, and then the boss would be Rom. And like that is in there, but it's set for one chalice, and it's Lower Pthumeru. Central Pthumeru, the final layer of that uses that like ritual. And it always uses it, and that's why like that layer when you go there is full of Rom spiders, and Rom is the boss, because it's just applying that ritual just specifically to that layer of the chalice.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, but originally you would have been able to apply that to other chalices as well. They just removed the option.
Okay, thank you. And you know how you find like ritual material in the dungeons?
Yep.
What did Pthumerians use those for?
Rituals.
Well, what kind of rituals? They don't need to get into the dungeon because they're already in the dungeon.
Yeah, that is a very good question, and it never really tells us.
Okay. Oh, and you know how I don't remember the quote, but you'll remember when it talks about like Bergenworth scholars finding something in the dungeons.
Oh, the holy medium of blood healing.
Yeah. So
yeah.
Is what was that?
Here's the fucking thing, right? Alfred says something to the degree of like, the scholars found the holy medium of blood healing and they venerate it in the Grand Cathedral. And because Ebrietas is underneath the Grand Cathedral, a lot of people assume, oh, Alfred is saying like Ebrietas is the medium they found and she's worshipped in the Grand Cathedral.
Mm-hmm.
He just means like the sort of the technique of blood ministering is what they do in the cathedral.
Oh.
Yeah.
How do you know?
Well, because no one's supposed to know about Ebrietas.
Well, maybe Alfred heard about Ebrietas through his gramophone.
That's true. Do you think that's what he does? Like he takes the helmet off and like puts one into his ear and listens up to doors. And that's how he knows so much. That's how he knows about like. That's how very confusingly he knows about Ligarius, despite not having been to Canehurst before.
Yes.
And that's how he knows all about like Canehurst nobles' invitations and stuff. He's just wandering around listening at the doors with his giant.
Did you ever do that? Did you ever put a glass to your ear and a wall to hear what someone was saying on the other side?
No.
I did. It doesn't work very well. But had I used a gramophone... Too bad we didn't think about it in the Executioner podcast. Because
yeah, it's a shame.
I feel like That would have explained a lot of things. Hmm.
Mm.
Yeah.
What was the topic?
Okay, so what happened is that Alfred was listening in to everybody's conversations, and then he heard about Ludwig's plot to assassinate Maria, and then Ludwig found out, so he killed Alfred and took his gramophone and then framed him for the murder of Queen Annalise.
We need to work Five Nights at Freddy's into this somehow. That's how you get the money.
What's that?
Five Nights at Freddy's is a series of horror games that, like, certain channels that will remain nameless have been able to mine for quite a lot of quote-unquote theories.
Okay, we can do that. Okay, so I think that's all for the quick dungeon overview.
No, you didn't mention Ys at all. We got sidetracked and started talking about.
Oh, I didn't. Okay,
yeah, you said
go ahead.
Ys, and then you said, does that mean that Lauren is connected to Lawrence? And then laughed for like 10 minutes, and I thought you were going to die. Oh no, it's happening again.
Oh God. Go on. Talk about Ys.
Okay, so Ys is even more confusing because they talk about, like, Ys is a land that lies in contact with the cosmos.
And I think you find that in the art book, right?
Well, when you go there, it's like there's a lot of.
No, I mean the description.
Oh yeah,
book?
it's in the art book. It's also just on the chalices.
Oh, okay.
The idea, like, it's quite vaguely explained. Basically, it just says that the choir found the East Chalice. It doesn't say where, or how. They just found it. And using the East Chalice, they were able to go to Ys. It's not clear from where, but I think the implication is they used the Altar of Despair under the Grand Cathedral to go there. And when they went there, they were able to bring Ebrietas back to the surface, and that's how she got to the Grand Cathedral. Ys is described as though it says it's like in contact with the cosmos. They never really specify what that means. It's full of sort of like very alien looking. It looks like tomb mold, but it's grown quite high. It sort of looks a bit like this sort of weird alien vegetation everywhere. It's all sort of glowing blue, and there's these weird sort of clouds of like cosmic sort of like, I don't know what it is, like sort of particles just sort of floating around there. And when you're down there, you run into things like the Celestials and Ebrietas, and like there's a lot of like brain suckers and celestial larvae and stuff. The idea being that like it's where the kin are as opposed to where the beasts are. Although confusingly, like there is you can get the pig as a boss quite easily if you do root chalices there. So you fight a cosmic pig. And yeah, what in contact with the cosmos exactly means is never really, like, I think it's not so much that Ys is like far away or something. It's more like Ys is the way they talk about the cosmos is like you're sort of in touch with the cosmos. Like you can like summon meteors and things by just like using your mind. So I think that's more what they're getting at with Ys. That Ys is like, there's something about it that like resonates with the cosmos. So it's where all these things are.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, like Ebrietas, like when you meet her, she's called like Ebrietas, daughter of the cosmos. So the idea is like
Right.
She was born of the cosmos and she was in Ys, and they managed to bring her to the surface.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. So I don't think it's actually in space. But again, like the chalices make so little physical sense at this point that it might be.
So what I wanted us to do is look at the link from Math's wiki and just quickly go over like each chalice dungeon boss and see which ones are Pthumerian and what's up with them.
I think they're all Pthumerian. Oh, except like, yeah, some of them aren't.
Okay, so Undead Giant Blades, go.
Undead Giant is a Pthumerian giant. The giants that guard the cathedral are just those giants that the church dug up. You can go under Yosefka's clinic and see that, yep, they're just digging up giants, and then they just dress them in church attire and put them in front of the cathedral to guard it. That's also presumably where the like church servant Pthumerians and the snatchers with the bags come from. That they are just they're just Pthumerians. That, I mean, because the Pthumerians don't seem to have a great deal of like cognitive ability. They just seem a bit like zombies. So I think the idea is that the church just dug them up and were like, "Hey, guard this thing," and like, okay.
Oh, they're like the giant from Dark Souls 3.
Yeah, they're just trying to be helpful, and you kill them.
Yeah.
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 You're the monster. It's very deep.
Yes, exactly. Okay. So. Oh, okay. On Math's wiki, there's a description here. Did you write it?
I don't know what you're talking about. Which one?
The same guy in Dead Giant.
Like, oh no, I didn't. I didn't write any of that.
Oh, because it's cool, because it says here, they have stitching visible all over their body where the pieces they're made up of separate.
Yeah.
And that's really cool. I didn't know that. And then, like, I Googled one and then looked closer. And then, yeah, they're like little Frankenstein giants or something.
They're internally called, like, Frank because of that.
Oh, snap. I just predicted more internal content from the past.
They're called that, and the variant that's in the lecture hall with the burning fist is called Franken-Nux.
Oh, yeah, that's right. We talked about that.
Yeah, I told Neo Lucky about it, and then we were just laughing about Franken-Nux for like 20 minutes as a name.
Aww. So maybe I didn't predict content at all again. It was just sort of remembering subconsciously what we talked about in another podcast.
Yeah. Oh, also, I just remembered something
fraud.
that I'll bring up at the end of this about the chalices and bosses.
Okay.
Okay.
What about the watchdog of the old lords?
It is just a monster.
Is it a Pthumerian who turned into a monster?
I don't think it is. I think it's just like a giant monster dog that they used to guard it.
So it's just like a domestic animal.
I guess, yeah.
And they look very much like those things from Dark Souls 3.
Yeah. Yeah. The watchdog of the
also...
the watchdog of the cold lords.
Exactly. And they also look like the thing from Berserk, like the monster that keeps talking to gods, but it's in his head or whatever.
Yeah, yeah.
Is there anything else about him that's...
Well, they're literally just a watchdog.
Okay. Keeper of the Old Lords. We kind of talked about them.
You can see looking at this that like they... Oh no, it's 8 eyes that they have, I think.
Yeah.
Like if you look at the picture, you can see that they have different sets of eyes, yeah.
Or it's one giant eye and it's just a mask that has like blinds or whatever.
Yeah, it's possible.
Like I can't you know what I mean, like a stick obscuring it in the middle. Like I can't talk. I'm trying to show you with my hand what I mean, but you can't see me.
No, I can't. Must be very frustrating.
Yes, it is. A lot of the time I talk to you with my hands, and that's how I explain things, but you can't see.
Okay.
Yeah. And it's annoying because you get it wrong. And you think I talk about something else, so I have to explain myself again.
What Patreon tier are we doing this live in the same room?
Oh my god! I don't know, man. I don't know. Okay, Undead Giant Club.
Remarkably similar to Undead Giant Blades. It's the worst of the giant bosses.
Really, why?
It just has a really annoying moveset where, like, every time it spins around, it has all these chains in its back with blades on them, and every time it spins around, the blades, like, whip around and hit you. So it's just sort of really annoying to fight because you can't stay near it for very long.
Maybe it's just showing you its cool club moves. I just had a flashback to our SNL conversation and Night at the Roxbury. Okay. Pthumerian descendant. Is it a Pthumerian?
Well, we can't be certain. We just don't know.
And what's their deal?
It just means like this is a descendant of Pthumerians, and it's in the labyrinth.
Why are they still in the labyrinth? Why didn't they go with the Wild-Bloods?
We just talked about that.
Did we now?
Yes.
Okay, then. Who's the forgotten madman?
Well, this is kind of neat because there used to be a theory that the forgotten madman was Ludwig.
Oh, snap.
Because, like, the first theory was Ludwig was the cleric beast, but he's very clearly not, even before the DLC. And then the Forgotten Madman is a character that you run into in the labyrinth. He is someone from the Healing Church who went down there and went mad. And he has Ludwig's Holy Blade and Ludwig's rifle.
Oh, snap.
So the theory at the time was, oh, maybe this is supposed to be Ludwig. Like, the reason he disappeared is that he went into the labyrinth.
Yeah.
And he just never came out again. But, no, he is not. He has a buddy as well.
Yeah, is it the madman's escort?
Yeah, when you're fighting him, the madman's escort will show up. When I think he's on half health, he gets a little friend.
Hmm. Yeah, that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Oh! We talked about... Oh, no, that was for Dark Souls 3. The sandworm or whatever.
The sad worm. Is that what Vardy's video is going to be?
So the abhorrent beast is not a Pthumerian. They're from Lauren.
Yeah, the abhorrent beast is just someone from Lauren who transformed into an electric-y thing. And it's very similar to Pal and the silver beast because they all have electrical attacks. So like,
And to the beggar.
yeah, there's certain things in like we're just going over the Chalice exclusive bosses, but other things show up as Chalice bosses. So like, Pal shows up as a boss.
We'll come to that.
Yeah.
We'll come to that later, though.
All right.
Okay. Pthumerian Elder. So what's the difference between the Elder and the Descendant?
The Elder is more important.
But they look pretty similar.
They look similar, but the Elder has a different moveset where he gets like the fire on his weapon.
Mm-hmm.
The Descendant has like a physical trick weapon. He has like a scythe that splits into two things that he throws at you. Whereas the Elder has a staff with flame on the end, and then he can shape the flame into different weapons to fight you with.
Mm-hmm.
That's the difference, yeah. The Elder is just like a stronger version of the Descendant, yeah.
Okay, thank you. And the bloodletting beast is...
Is Ludwig.
No!
Okay, so the bloodletting beast, as far as like the game data is concerned, is Lawrence.
And we have a whole Lawrence podcast where you go into detail.
Yeah, they then decided he wasn't, but they left enough in there that it's just sort of like vague. I think it's safe to say it still is.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the idea behind the bloodletting beast is like the bloodletting beast is interesting because like I was talking about how when you go into the chalices, you're sort of going back into a specific point in time. The bloodletting beast is the opposite of that because as you fight the bloodletting beast, you're kind of following it. So the bloodletting beast that you fight in Lower Pthumeru is an earlier point in time to the bloodletting beast that you fight in Pthumeru I Hill. So, like, the implication is, like, the bloodletting beast came into the chalices from outside, and he is going down. And what happens is, presumably after you beat him in Lower Pthumeru, his head falls off. And, I mean, if we just accept that it's Lawrence, like, he's killed in Lower Pthumeru, he's decapitated, his head is brought back to the church, and then the version you fight in Pthumeru I Hill, the head is gone. For the first half of the fight, it's just a headless thing, and then at 50% hit points, this huge vermin bursts out of the neck, and you realize that, like, okay, this is like this thing is technically dead, but it's just sort of animated by all the vermin in its body, and it strikes at you with the giant vermin, and also it has this big wound on its back that in the initial fight is just a wound, but when you fight the headless version, the back is sort of like it's fly blown. It's just filled with all of these vermin that have wings, and then as it's fighting you, they fly out of the back. It's like this nest that's full of them, and they sort of like it has a projectile attack that like it's sort of hard to see because it happens very quickly, but if you like freeze frame and watch footage of it, those projectiles are literally like another form of the vermin, and they have wings. It's almost like they've molted and they've like grown into something else, and they just sort of fly at you.
Mm-hmm. And we also have a whole Vermin and Phantasm podcast on the channel as well.
Yeah.
Okay, so now, what about Queen Yarnam?
Well, we talked about her already quite a lot, I think.
Okay, but
yeah,
she's a Pthumerian queen, and also she's called a Pthumerian bride somewhere.
Yeah, there's what happens is when you're fighting Yarnam, she will summon clones of herself. And the clones are distinguished because they have a different dress that's like less ornate than hers. And they're also not pregnant. And then there is a variant in the unused chalices where it's like a less powerful version of Yarnam who is just called Pthumerian Bride.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. What's kind of interesting about the Yarnam fight is that Murgo is technically part of that fight. He's just invisible and intangible. So, like, as far as the game is concerned, you're really fighting Murgo. Like, you're fighting Murgo who is inside Yarnam. So, like, there's the Yarnam boss, but then, like, attached to her and, like, technically hovering above her head, but invisible and, like, can't be interacted with is, quote-unquote, Murgo. That's the real boss. And Murgo is what does, like, she can, she has two different, Yarnam kind of has two different sets of attacks. There's the attacks she does, where she's able to conjure, like, a big sword made out of blood, and she's able to, like, cut herself and shoot blood projectiles at you. And then there's other things she does where before doing them, she, like, rubs her pregnant stomach. And when she does that, like, she's able to, like, use sort of psychic attacks to like hold you in place and things. And the idea is like that's Murgo. It's like she's fighting you, but also when she like rubs her stomach, she's getting like Murgo who is alive and like kicking in the stomach to do stuff. Kicking in her like womb to
Yeah.
Yeah. And like the name of that boss fight internally is called Prince. It's not called Yarnam. So the idea is like you're fighting the Prince, you're fighting Murgo. And that's possibly why when Murgo is taken from her, she can't go and get him back herself because, like, Murgo seems like he was the source of her strength.
Mm-hmm. Interesting.
So, like, yes, like one of the questions was, and this came up at the beginning, like, so Yarnam is looking for Murgo. Murgo's been kidnapped, but then she gets there and she just stands there. And it's like, why doesn't she just kill the wet nurse? Because when you fight her in the dungeons, she's extremely strong. She could just, like, wipe the floor with the wetness. And the answer seems to be that, like, her power actually came from Murgo. So without Murgo, she's sort of helpless.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And also Yarnam drops, I think, the Yarnam stone at the end.
Yeah, she drops the Yarnam stone, which is, like, implied to be Murgo's corpse.
Yeah. And this is interesting. I think you mentioned it in one of your videos, where the Yarnam stone is the equivalent of a stone baby, which is a real thing.
I didn't mention that, but other people have.
Okay, cool.
Like it's a real it's a real thing that can happen where like a fetus that dies becomes like a
stone.
Yeah.
And if you like look up a picture of a stone baby and compare it to like the Yarnam stone, it's like very similar.
Or just take our word for it and don't look up pictures of dead babies.
No, it's not. It's not a dead baby. Well, if you look at it on Wikipedia, it's just like, it's like a stone.
Yeah.
And it looks like the Yarnam stone.
Yeah.
Hey, Corvo's here.
Hi, Corvo.
Did you hear him? He said hi.
Hi.
It's so cute and soft. I can't help it. I'm so allergic, but I kiss him anyway. He's not impressed or amused. He's like, put me down. Okay. Bye, Corvo.
I'm just checking if we have a prime minister yet.
And?
I don't know because the live coverage thing I was following crashed.
Oh, no.
I don't know yet.
Okay. Well, it's not as important as doing this podcast, Rich, so let's go.
True. Okay.
Get back on point, bro.
Okay.
Okay, another thing I want us to go through quickly, like in 140 characters or less.
Yeah.
Which ones of these are Pthumerians? And these are bosses and preset chalice dungeons.
Okay, hang on. Let's The answer is probably not many of them, but we'll see.
Like the ones we already mentioned, but other, like, for example, Rom the Vacuous Spider. Pthumerian
Okay.
or not?
No.
Okay.
I'm looking
That's
at them
enough.
now.
We
like,
had a whole podcast on Rom, though.
well, then why did you ask?
I just want to see which ones of these are Pthumerians. Because this is a Pthumerian podcast.
Undead giant with twin curved blades, yes. Merciless Watchers, yes. Watchdog, yes. Beast possessed soul might have been a Pthumerian before he turned into a beast. I think that's the implication.
Okay.
Because the beast possessed soul has like pyromancy attacks that are similar to what some Pthumerians can do.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Keeper of the Old Lords is Pthumerian descendant is Merciless Watchers, yes. I'm not going to go through all of these. It's ridiculous. I think that's sort of all. The brain, yeah. Yeah, that's all.
What about the Bell Maidens?
Well, they're not a boss though.
So we need another list?
We don't need another list, but
Let's see. Chalice dungeon enemies. Okay.
okay. You know how this has a list of like what enemies show up in what chalices?
What?
This should have a list of like what enemies show up in what chalices. I'm thinking of it. Oh, yep. Yeah. The what enemies show up in what chalices thing is by me, and I have to go through all these chalices with a notepad and write down exactly what enemies show up in what chalices.
So can you tell me what enemies show up in the Pthumerian labyrinth?
Well, I'll have to look at it because I don't remember, but yeah. Yeah, the Pthumerian labyrinth is where you find most of the actual Pthumerians, strangely enough. If you like there's basically like there's Pthumeru, there's Hintertombs, which is just like a variant of Pthumeru. It's just like far away bits of Pthumeru. Mm-hmm. They're where you find the Pthumerians. And then if you go to East or you go to Lauren, you'll find different sorts. So in Lauren, you mostly find beasts, and in East, you mostly find kin.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
What's a Watcher's Gravedigger?
That is, by Watchers, we just mean the Pthumerian enemies. And there's a variant of the Pthumerian enemies that's like, he's slightly taller than the others and he's got a pickaxe, and when you run into him, if he's not aggro yet, he's hitting the wall with his pickaxe like he's tunneling.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, and the Labyrinth Watchers... Oh, I thought there was something else.
No.
Okay.
Yeah, all those like Cleaver, Dagger, Cleaver and Lance and Halberd, Twin Axes, Club, Mace, etc. I had to write all that down.
Is the Rabid Dog Pthumerian?
It's a dog.
Is the Snake Ball Pthumerian?
It's a snake.
Is a Labyrinth Rat Pthumerian?
It's a rat.
What's a Wandering Nightmare?
They're the little like blob things that give you blood gems.
They're little mini not orphans. They're little mini
One
Reborn.
Reborn.
What am I thinking? Yeah, there we go.
Yeah.
Rotten Corpse, is that Pthumerian?
I think it is a dead Pthumerian, yeah. It just looks like a zombie.
It looks like a Yarnamite.
We're talking about the same thing.
I don't know, it's here on the list.
Oh, I think it is a yarn. Yeah, I think we're talking about Yarnamites, yeah.
It's in Hintertomb, rotted
Oh, yeah,
corpse.
yeah. I think we mean the, like, it's like just like, you find them in central Yarnam as well. They're just, like, drowned corpses in the aqueduct.
Okay.
They
What
drag
about
themselves around.
Gel?
Gel is slime.
Is that the Marian slime?
Yeah, why not?
What about Eye Collector? Eye Collector is the witches or whatever, right?
That's Eye Collector is just the Witch of Hemwick without as many eyes attached to
Okay,
her.
so we talked about it. Bellringer, Pthumerian. They even say
Yes.
she's a mad Pthumerian or something.
Yeah, they say specifically she appears to be a mad Pthumerian.
Mm-hmm. What drove her mad?
The Eldritch Truth.
Whoa! Deep?
And also having to do a series of podcasts.
What about Evil Labyrinth Spirit?
Yeah, that's like a dead Pthumerian, like just the ghost of a dead Pthumerian.
So I'm looking at the picture, and it makes me think of that ghost Lance found, the one with the beard or whatever.
Yeah, they have the same attacks too. It looks like there was a male and female equivalent ghosts.
Oh snap! I'm so smart!
Female equivalent here who is like just a very, very pale, transparent woman with like very scraggly white hair who tries to stab you. There is an unused male equivalent that is a sort of a man with no legs. He just sort of floats and he has a very big beard. A lot of the cut enemies have beards. I don't know if we want to do a discussion of that one day, if we really run out of material. The cut beards of Bloodborne. But yeah, yeah, she has a very, very rare attack where she will shoot messengers at you.
Oh right, yeah, you told me about that.
Yeah, and it's so rare that like I actually triggered it once and then thought I had imagined it. Because I was chased by a messenger that was homing in on me and then it hit me and I made a Reddit post. I was like, I think a messenger just got shot at me. And everyone was like, could you see? Like, no, I don't have any screenshots. I'm like, oh, well, who knows? And I was like, maybe I imagined that. Maybe that didn't happen. And then it turned out, no, it is an attack that they can do. They will fire a little messenger at you. And I just like, it's so rare I only saw it once. And then when I found out they could do it, I went back and I specifically tried to make them and they wouldn't do it. But yeah, the male equivalent can, like, he does it consistently if you can get him in the developer chalices. He shoots them out in a spread like 5 and they sort of home in on you. It's a removed attack that you used to be able to do. In the alpha version, instead of the executioner's gloves, you have a thing that shoots a spread of 3 little messengers that then home in on a target instead of the skulls. And that's basically what they're doing. They just have an enemy version of that attack that you used to be able to do.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Oh, and the if you look at the art book of the female spirit, her abdomen is sort of slightly swollen and red, a bit like Yharnam's, and she's got these drawings of like they look like messengers sort of crawling out of her abdomen. So I think like it might be left over from that like she would have little messengers crawling out of her that she would shoot at you.
Okay.
Yeah.
Labyrinth Madman.
Yeah, that's the like sage guy that you meet, the like really tall, with like the long black hair that charges at you screaming, that people encounter once and then never go into the labyrinth again because like, I'm not fighting this thing. Kind of looks like the girl from The Ring. And you run into them and they just like scream and run at you, and people who, yeah, and they've said like, I encountered that thing once, I'm never doing these chalice dungeons again because I don't want to run into that fucking thing again.
Oh. What about Undead Giant?
Yeah, we've mentioned the Undead Giant like 5 times.
Okay, what about Labyrinth Madman?
We just talked about the Labyrinth Madman.
Why is it here twice?
Because they're different weapon variants, which, by the way, I had to keep track of that. I had to keep track of it. It's not even like I had to write down when I saw one. I had to write down when I saw one and what it was equipped with.
Lol.
So you can imagine in those bits where you're attacked by 12 of them at once and having to keep them at a distance and just write down one's got an axe, one's got a halberd, one's got a lantern.
Yeah. What about Bloodlicker?
Bloodlickers, they look very Pthumerian.
Okay.
I think the implication is that they were Pthumerians who transformed into these just blood-hungry things, but they're not considered beast or kin. They're just considered their own thing. So, yeah, that's
okay.
they're patterned after a Japanese Buddhist thing called the hungry ghosts. The idea is people who were gluttonous in the afterlife, they become these things with these huge distended stomachs, but they're always hungry. So they have to they crawl around on the ground eating feces and blood and stuff that's dropped there because they're so hungry all the time. So that's what that's what it's getting at, that it's Pthumerians who were so greedy for blood that they sort of became these things.
Okay.
Yeah.
What about Nightmare Apostle?
Nightmare Apostles are just the spiders.
Are they Pthumerian?
Well, I don't know. Some of them have heads, but they just look like human heads.
Okay. Is that it? Oh, Kidnapper. Did we mention Kidnappers?
Yeah, they're the ones who work for Mensis. They're Pthumerian.
Okay. Merciless Watcher.
Yep, they're Pthumerian.
Watcher Chieftain.
It's the same thing.
Keeper's Hunting Dog.
It's a dog.
Fluorescent Flower.
Centipede.
Okay. So I think that's all. Oh, what is this? Pthumeru Eye Heal. Okay, let's see. What do we have here? Lost Child of Antiquity.
They're the gargoyles from Canehurst, and I think the implication is that they're Pthumerian as well. They're like the Bloodlickers. They're Pthumerians who turned into this other form. But again, the game doesn't consider them beast or kin.
And we talk about them in the Executioner podcast.
The thing is, there's kind of a third thing that isn't beast or kin that kind of sort of exists, but is not really played up. Where it's backwards, where some weapons have a feature called righteous. It's a couple of church weapons. And the righteous modifier means they do extra damage against some enemies that are connected to Canehurst. So it's there's kind of a third thing that isn't beast or kin, but it doesn't have a name. And it's sort of hidden in the files, but it exists.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. What about Gravekeeper Scorpion?
I'll give you a guess as to what that is.
Is it Pthumerian?
Well, it's a scorpion. It does have a skull face, which led some people to say, what if it's a Pthumerian that turned into a scorpion?
And?
I think it's just a scorpion.
Okay, and what are those things? We talked about them in the Phantasm podcast. They eat you, and then they poop you.
Oh, the hole diggers.
Where are they? Why don't I see any?
They're not in any preset chalices. They're always in random ones. I don't know if they're called hole diggers or labyrinth moles. Let's have a look.
Yeah, hole diggers. Yeah.
Yeah, hole diggers. Well, they're just a weird creature that digs holes in the labyrinth.
Are they Pthumerian?
Well, it's weird because they look a bit like they might have been a person once, because they have arms and legs sort of sticking out the sides, and they look like someone who sort of swelled up, and now just inside them is this giant worm thing that's dragging them around. You kind of like how the headless bloodletting beast is its head is gone, but the body is just a host to this giant worm. This almost looks the same, whatever. Maybe it wasn't a person, maybe it was a dog or something, but the corpse is just being driven around by this blob thing that lives inside it. And it's pretty clear that they're separate, because what can happen is if you're behind it, the head will just retract and then like pop out the other side. Like it just turns around inside the thing's body and pops out the other end.
Okay.
Yeah.
I don't have any more questions, but people on Discord had a couple of questions.
I
about
wanted to bring up
Pthumerians.
something about like Yarnamites in the tombs, because that's something that we
Go
found
on.
explore. Okay, so Trin and I have been exploring what we're just going to call like the prototype chalices. They're like not finished, but there's bits of them that we recognize from early trailers. One of the early trailers shows the hunter coming across just a regular Yarnamite in a chalice. And then then there's this like weird effect, and then it cuts away and it cuts back again, and the hunter is fighting the abhorrent beast in that room. So it looks a lot like we found that room, and we found that inside it there is a Yarnamite and an abhorrent beast that are just sort of standing there. And it really looks like what would have happened is that at this point in development, you would run into just Yarnamites in the Chalice dungeons. The idea being that they had just wandered down there. And they would then transform into beasts and become bosses. Because what happens is, you enter this room, there is the abhorrent beast and a Yarnamite, and they're just both there. This is kind of how the game does beast bosses in the retail version, because what will happen is, like, you'll fight the human version, and then the beast version's there. It's just like stored off the map somewhere. So like when you fight Gascoigne, there's human Gascoigne, and then beast Gascoigne is just under the floor. And what happens is when Gascoigne transforms, it doesn't like transform the model, it just removes it and puts beast Gascoigne there. So it looks like this is an early version of that, where like there's just a human and a beast held in the same area. And based on the trailer, it looks like that guy was supposed to transform into a beast. And interestingly, like, if you kill... There's just, like, the Yarnamite is standing there. If you kill him, you get the prey slaughtered message.
The what?
If you kill just, like, the Yarnamite who is standing there, the game treats that like you beat the boss. It says prey slaughtered, and you can get a vermin from him if you have corruption equipped. Yeah. Impurity. Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah, so it looks like basically an early idea was that Yarnamites were going to be going down into the chalices. It wouldn't just be Pthumerians there. They would have, like, wandered in.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so now I get questions that we have.
Yeah, questions from Discord.
Okay.
So Wicker Top asks, how did the Pthumerians come to be the way they are? Are they a race that inherently are the way they are, or did they only become that way upon contact with Great Ones?
It looks like that they would, like, without constant access to that blood, they just turn into people. So, like, either they were people who became that way because of the Great Ones, and then they reverted back to being people, or they were always that way, but then without the old blood, they turn into people. So they're like the ancestors of people.
Okay. Why do Pthumerians resemble humans so closely if they are not directly related?
I think we just kind of covered that like, they are directly related.
Okay. And how Pthumerian is Kinehurst? Maria and the Queen of Kinehurst? Is Pthumerianism a loose scale, or are they a race that interbred with humanity? If so, how? Do we have any inclination who interbred with them? If so, and for what purpose?
I think they're just like Pthumerians and humans are the same species. And whether you're like Pthumerian is just down to like how like thick the Pthumerian blood is in you. But like they're just people. Like the whole idea behind Ariana is that she's related to Annalise. Like she doesn't know that she's got Pthumerian blood in her. And she's just like a normal person, and it doesn't surface until the red moon happens.
Okay. Thanks, Wickertop. So, Worldwide Panther is asking, are those fat-rolling guys in the labyrinths also Pthumerians?
Yeah. Yeah, we did that. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you, Panther. Stormmocker asks, what is the relationship between Pthumeru and Lauren?
We don't know, because like we were saying, like it says that Pthumeru happens and then like Lauren happens before Yharnam. So it has to be like Pthumeru, then Lauren, then Yharnam. But I don't know exactly how the continuity there really works, because Lauren's also described as like it's very far away, it's in a desert somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess like I don't know, you could maybe say that like the Pthumerian labyrinth goes like so far away, like past the Hinter tombs, you end up in a desert somewhere. But it's not like spelled out, and I don't know the exact relationship.
Okay. And Stormwalker has another question about Cause and how Cause is connected to Lauren.
Yeah.
But you have like a whole video on that on your channel, so I would recommend watching that. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, you do, because it's really good. We also talk about that in some podcasts. Do you remember which?
No.
Okay, well, so check out Rich's channel.
I don't remember any of these. Like I'm gonna have forgotten this within like 5 minutes.
So check out Rich's channel. He talks about it in one of his videos. And we talk about it in our podcast as well, but we don't remember which.
Cool.
Maybe we'll have like a... Oh, I think it was in the Menses podcast.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think so. So check that out. So it's possibly there. And then, what is the relationship between the Great Ones and Ptumerians, and how did they initially make contact with the Great Ones?
Well, the way it's explained is like the Pthumerians were the servants of the Great Ones. So I don't know if like there's two possible like ways of doing it, which is that the Pthumerians were humans, then the Great Ones found them, and then through contact with the Great Ones they became the Pthumerians as we know them now. Then they looked after the Great Ones, then they got ideas above their station and named themselves a queen, made their own civilization, got away from the Great Ones, then turned back into people. Or it could be that like they were always, like maybe the Great Ones made them or something, the way they are in the labyrinth, and then they became people over time.
Mm-hmm. And since Bergenworth is connected to Pthumeru excavations, and there is a lot of cut content, do we know anything about the initial idea behind the relationship between Pthumeru and the scholars?
I don't know.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's okay, Richie, you don't have to know everything.
Well, it's... the Bergenworth stuff is like... It looks like the first thing that Bergenworth encountered was just the phantasms. This is weird, because like they talk about Bergenworth find the phantasms, then that's when they start thinking, and they find the old blood. That's what gets them to thinking about eyes on the inside and like evolving humanity. But then their next thing is that they attack the fishing hamlet, which is weird because like, wouldn't you go after the Pthumerians rather than the fish people? Like, I don't know what exactly they're gaining by doing the hamlet rather than just going deeper into the dungeons. Maybe they didn't have the right chalices. I don't know. The thing is, like, the Pthumerians are supposed to have unlocked the Eldritch Truth. So you'd think they'd just keep investigating the Pthumerians, but instead they decide to go to the hamlet. Maybe because the ones in the hamlet beckon Cos, so they actually have a great one. Maybe, rather than just traces of one. Yeah.
Stormwalker also asks some questions about the Forbidden Woods. We have a podcast on something relating to the Forbidden Woods.
Yeah.
So check that out. Also, you might have something related to the Forbidden Woods posted at some point.
Yeah.
So stay tuned. So thanks so much, Stormwalker. Princess Hunter asks, why do Chalice dungeons suck so hard?
Well, I've been playing the prototype ones, And it looks like they had to pare back like the plans they had because they're a lot more elaborate. Like I was playing a prototype one last night and I actually got lost, which you kind of don't do in the other ones because they're quite short. But this was like huge. It was like a really sprawling place. And yeah, I think like I remember them going on and on about the chalices like pre-release, that it was going to be a big deal. And then they just sort of like lost interest, maybe. I don't know. Something about them wasn't working, I guess.
Okay.
But yeah, it looks like they had a lot more planned that didn't come through, and like there's all these like cut chalices, like boss rush chalices, and other rituals you could do to change the chalices in different ways, and all these enemies that would have been there, and like one the feeling feeling, it's a bit more than a feeling. It's like based on like evidence, but like it's circumstantial evidence, but it's not like I think this. Back when Bloodborne was Demon's Souls 2, I'm pretty sure the point of the chalices was that at the bottom you would find Boletaria. And that would be the reveal. And then when it became its own thing, it became like Pthumeru Hill.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. Thank you, Princess Hunter. So Hiram asks, there seem to be two different eras in the Pthumerians, the Ancients and the Descendants. Maybe the first ones were just guarding the Great Ones, and second were corrupted or something like that. What do you think? Also, what do you think about the Eldritch Truth?
The thing about the Pthumerians is that, like, Yharnam is still at the bottom, the queen, and she's the one that they name.
Mm-hmm.
So, like, I don't think there's, like, a pre- and post-Queen Yharnam thing going on. I think it's all post-Queen Yharnam.
Mm-hmm.
Because, like, Hill looks like that's the furthest back we go, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I don't know what descendant means. Like, it may just mean, like a member of the Pthumerian family or something, like, but isn't an elder, rather than, like, someone who is, like, X generations descended. I don't know, though.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And I guess the other question, what do you think about the Eldritch Truth? We can cover in another podcast.
Can we?
If we talk about Great Ones, yeah.
All right. I don't think
Cool.
it just means like the wisdom of the eldritch things, though. It's not like it's not like a book or something that's got there's
Okay,
the eldritch
then.
truth.
Okay, cool. Well, thank you, Hiram. Ipa says, I have always been under the impression that after the first Pthumerians ascended into godhood, they enslaved the rest of Pthumerians. Is that the case?
Well, it's really hard to tell because, like, they talk about the Pthumerians as a slave race almost.
Mm-hmm.
But then when you run into them, like we said before, they just seem like they're zombies. Like, and they just keep digging all day. And that's possibly why, like, the church are able to enslave them. Because, like, right, when the game first came out, people were saying, like, oh, and this includes me. It was like, oh, the reason that the church has, like, these giants and it has these Pthumerian servants working for them is that the church are experimenting with Pthumerian blood and they're just turning into these things because the blood is going into them. But, like, it's sort of obvious now that what's going on is that they're just digging these things up and putting them to work. So it's almost like they don't have a will of their own. They're just like zombies. The only ones that seem to have a will are the descendants and the elders. And that might be because, like, maybe they all start off that way and the descendants and elders end up with more, like, insight or knowledge or something, and that gives them, like, a more control over themselves.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you. And do we know that there ever was Great Ones who didn't start out as mortals on the Earth where the game takes place? Could it be that Odin, for example, was originally a Pthumerian?
Well, the thing is, like, Great One just means, like the Japanese for Great One is, like, superior being. So it's not like, and again, like, English is like this as well, but the way it writes Great One is almost like it's a species, but it isn't. It's like, it just means anything that's sufficiently like advanced is just a Great One. Like, yeah. So like they all, I guess, have to have started out as something. I think the idea behind Erden is like the Great Ones all project themselves into the Dreamlands. So Erden just being a voice is like, Erden is something that projected itself into the Dreamlands, and like that's all that's left of it. Like it doesn't have a body at all. It's just its consciousness sort of floating around.
Cool. Thank you. Thanks, Ipa. So Princess of War has a question about Pthumerians rebelling, but I think we already answered that before. But also another question is like, how could they have possibly been successful? Did the Great Ones just stop giving a damn?
Well, they're asleep.
Okay.
Like the Great Ones are just asleep in their tombs, and then like while they're asleep, the Pthumeru, I guess because like no one's going in there, and all they do is just build tombs all day. Eventually they were like, let's just have our own civilization. I think this might be partially taken from I mean, like not everything has to be taken from somewhere, but like in Mountains of Madness, it's a Lovecraft story. It's about a like group of scientists exploring this like the ruins of an alien civilization that's buried, and that has in it the reason the civilization fell is that the slaves turned on them. So it might come from that like, although the Pthumerians don't seem to have like killed the Great Ones, they just sort of like started their own civilization. And it was like, I guess it was seen as not a great thing to do because they have ideas above their station. But yeah.
Cool. Thank you, Princess of War. Princess Beef has a question about Pthumerians and their relationship with humans, but I think we answered those. So thank you for the questions, Princess Beef, but you'll hear the answers in the beginning of the podcast. Agent Funk has questions relating to like Pthumerians and the church giants, but again, I think we answered that, so you'll hear that before this part.
You'll have already
heard
for the
it. Question, Agent Funk.
Yeah,
exactly. Devilat asks, what is up with the beast-possessed soul? There is only one in the main game, and then otherwise you see them in Chalice dungeons. Does soul just mean that they are a poor soul who is possessed, or is there anything more?
I think it does just mean a poor soul who's possessed. They're a really, really odd enemy because what happens is that like you find there's one above ground in Yharnam, in Cathedral Ward, and it just behaves like a regular enemy. But weirdly, there are ones in the chalices where if you wake them up, like they start off asleep, they will fight whatever is closest to them. It doesn't have to be you. So you can lead them throughout the labyrinth and they will just attack. Like if they run to a Pthumerian, they'll just start fighting them. And you can heal them with the choir bell. So it's like they sort of considered to be like on a neutral team that is against you and the enemy, and you can heal them. And we're not entirely sure what is going on there. And like it's possible to like use a glitch to get them into boss arenas and they'll fight bosses for you. They're just a very, very strange enemy in general, and we're not entirely sure like was there a plan that did they have like a set piece planned where like the beast possessed soul was gonna like fight other beasts in Yharnam or something? We don't know.
Cool, and thank you for the question. And Hexapad asks, why is the Pthumerian robe unavailable to players?
That's a good question, because like this game's obsessed with cloth physics. You'd think you would be able to.
Yeah. So what's the answer, Richie?
I don't know.
Cool. Okay, thank you, Hexa. And Path of Magic asks, why does Cathedral Ward seem so patched together and detached from everything else? I've always been a fan of how the areas in each world fit together in the series, But Cathedral Ward's location makes no sense since it's meant to be right above the Gascoigne boss room, which has an almost clear view of the sky. Not to mention how the buildings in the area are all colliding through each other and have entrance doors halfway up the building and staircases leading nowhere.
Yes. Looking at Lance's videos and stuff, there's just like a clump of buildings that they copy and paste over and over again to just fill out areas. That's why none of it. And like a lot of what's on the horizon is Old Yharnam. Like they just get Old Yharnam, copy it, and then whenever you like in the distance, they just paste Old Yharnam over and over again at like slightly different rotations because there's enough variation in Old Yharnam for it to kind of look like somewhere else from a distance. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Cool. All right. Thank you, Path of Magic.
If you're interested in Cathedral Wards, like not quite making sense, an early version of Cathedral Ward was found on the Dark Souls Remastered release, and that was extracted. So, it doesn't have any textures, but someone got it running in Grand Theft Auto 5 with just like a brick texture slapped onto it. So you can go to that channel, which we'll link in the description, and you can see what you can see an early version of Cathedral Ward playable in Grand Theft Auto 5. And you can see that, like, it's basically the same design, but, like, that big circular plaza where all the giants are isn't there. And there would have just been, like, a street leading to the cathedral from those buildings. It's a lot less complicated. And Upper Cathedral Ward is there, but it's designed differently, and there's, like a little graveyard behind and a spiral staircase and things like that. It's sort of neat to look at.
Mm-hmm. Cool. Okay, my laptop is about to die, so let me go grab a wire and I'll be right back. All right, hello?
Hi.
Okay.
We have a prime minister.
Yay!
Yay. It's the second worst option.
So, you said it's gonna take 10 minutes, huh?
Maybe.
Yeah, you said Pthumerians will take 10 minutes. You said we don't even need to do this because we have a 10-minute video already, or something along those lines.
What?
Didn't you say we don't really need to do this because we have a 10-minute video talking about the
But I
Pthumerians?
think that, like, all the material in that video is covered in this one. It's just that this one is almost 3 hours long.
I think you might be right.
Yeah, like, I think this is just a longer and worse version of something we've already done.
All right, Richie. Do the outro.
For some reason, you listened to episode... sorry. It's remarkably similar to something we already did, but longer and worse. Why not smash that like button? And,
Can we ask people to smash the dislike button?
no, it's your channel, I don't care. Do you know that, like, that likes and dislikes are considered equal as far as the YouTube algorithm is concerned?
Oh, snap!
Because it just considers likes and dislikes to be engagement. So if you get a dislike, then people have engaged, so you're popular. So it doesn't care.
Oh, because there's always this at least one person who gives me a dislike, like, right as it's uploaded. There's a dislike, and it's like, bro, it's 3 hours long. Like, you couldn't have watched it that fast.
No, there's a guy I follow who has, I think, like 300 subscribers. But there's always a dislike immediately. There's just like one guy has a vendetta against this channel that like no one really watches.
But in reality, they're helping me.
Yeah, pretty ironic. It's like the ultimate like internet argument win. The whole, well, by disliking us, you're just making us more popular.
So like, dislike, whatever you prefer, you know, whatever your heart tells you. You can leave nothing. That's fine too.
I like how you're giving people permission to have opinions.
Well, most videos just tell them to like, right? I'm being very, like, open about this.
We need to do more like I'm gonna balance a fidget spinner on my nose, and if I can keep it there for 30 seconds, you have to leave a like, guys.
Yeah, I agree.
If you learn something new,
Leave a like.
if you learn something new, like I don't know. I hope you learned something. If you didn't learn anything new, then like I'm really sorry that you've sat through this whole thing and it was pointless. If you didn't learn anything new, just like send me a DM or something and I'll apologize.
You're like George Clooney,
Yeah.
refunding people for watching that Batman movie.
Yeah, and also in every other way, I'm like George Clooney. I'm an extremely successful, handsome Hollywood superstar.